the middle colonies. So this map designed to show you the middle colonies, pardon me, all of them, and the 17th century basically. So it's color coded, right? That line here is what England is claiming. But notice the distinction here, class, between that and then it says areas of European settlement. So if you look at it not in terms of just land, but where people are Europeans are living, it's whichever color. Yeah, right here, right? So it's much like bubbles, little bubbles here, here. So a whole lot, like once you look at where the people actually are, it's like, okay, a lot smaller ground than we thought. Than the impression that maps usually give. Excuse me. So far we've talked about Spanish exploration and settlement, right? French exploration and settlement, English exploration and settlement. What I would like to do now is give you, like compare these three European countries and their settlements, but it's very much a bare bones approach. So I'm just going to compare a couple of things. So if we go to New France, class, we go to the colony of New France, turn around, or get out. Day after day after day after day, I look up and you're turned around and you keep talking to land me every damn day. Turn around, face forward, or get out. New France. Fur trade. Reason why they're coming. Main reason for being there. That's the goal. That's the thing. Key things to notice here, folks. They have what scholars call a frontier of inclusion. Frontier of inclusion. And so basically what that's saying is these guys come and they're going, let's make pals with the local natives. Enter into treaties, they'll help us, we'll help them, they'll be part of our society, this kind of thing. And they're saying, and they understand, like they're going, okay, French people, Indian people living together, you're going to get French plus Indian, creates a new ethnic group of sorts. These guys go, that's totally cool, we have a name for it. Now, like in the old social strata, these guys are lower down, but France is like, it's all good, man, it's fine. So frontier of inclusion. Compare this to Spain. If we go to New Spain, these guys were all about money and religion. All about money and religion. Top reasons for existing, for being there. Notice also a frontier of inclusion. Mestizo. So, they too have a name for, right? They're like, okay, Spanish person plus Indian person, you're going to end up with new group, mestizo. In the caste system, these folks, again, lower down, but they are, they're right off the bat considered part of society. They're like, yeah, that's totally what we figured would happen. Let's take a look at the English colonies. So, first, in the north, Puritans, reason for coming, primarily religion, right? Not exactly surprising. But notice here the difference. This is where England is distinct from France and Spain. Zones of exclusion. Whereas the other two countries, like Native Americans, are going to be part of our society. The English folks, with a couple of exceptions, small exceptions, they're essentially going, push, shove out of the way. Shove out of the way, get lost. They're shoving people. And they don't want them around, right? They don't want natives to be part of their thing. And in this case, the inevitable, English person plus Native American person equals a person of mixed ancestry, but whereas the other two countries had names for it, the English go with a derogatory term. They're not nice. You and I might say mixed heritage. These guys call them half-breeds. Not so nice. Let's travel south. Virginia. Reason for coming? Well, okay. Long-term reason for being there, right? They're all about agriculture, not the original reason for coming, but that becomes a thing, right? Tobacco. But once again, it's an English colony, so we see zones of exclusion. And the use of the derogatory term, again, half-breed. So this gives you, as I said before, right, it's a very bare bones approach here, just stripped down. But some key differences and similarities between these three countries and their colonies. Are there any questions, folks, about middle colonies, settlement, etc.?
Bless you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Switching gears, we're going to talk fairly briefly about life in colonial, British North America, 18th century years here. So you can tell, covering 70 years. We're going to zoom in on just a couple things during this time period. Okay, key terms. So these key terms can be put in basically two categories, slavery and religion. So for this PowerPoint, that's essentially, if we boil it down, that's what we're talking about, the two topics, slavery and religion. How are we doing, folks? We're about done? Okay, so if we're looking at the British colonies, North America, there are two fundamental facts about 18th century. One, this is a time of mind-boggling population growth. Fact number two, it's a period of rapid economic expansion. Both of these things are kind of supporting each other. Population growth is helping the economy expand. The expansion of the economy is making it more feasible for people to, realistically
have large families and or people to immigrate in large numbers and find jobs and, you know, be able to make it go with it. And overall, this may sound weird at first, but colonists were better off here than they were in England. One little example, just to illustrate, as early as the 900s, I think it was King Edward, but King of England passes a law about air pollution. So as early as, 900 and something, CE, England's got a serious air pollution problem. North America, a zillion centuries later, not so much, right? So, a healthier place. Okay. So this is clearly a very simplified map. Some of you have seen some version of this before.
So the triangle trade is this. In Europe, they're manufacturing finished products, right? Desks, chairs, whatever, stuff. And they're loading them onto ships. Those ships carry them. So this is the slave trading area. So if you're in other parts of Africa, as long as you're far enough away from this, you're safe. But anyway, so they would come along here and they would offload those finished goods and trade them for slaves. So what's going on in Africa is the tribes that live along the coast here are raiding inland and taking captives from their enemy tribes, bringing them to the coast and selling their captives into slavery. So there's a lot of tribal rivalry going on in Africa, and the ones on the coast are finding a way to get rid of their enemies who are further inland. But at any rate, so they load up with, ship size varied, right? So they're loading up between 200, 300 slaves, crowding them onto ships, and they take them across. Now, this one's showing it going here, but they took them, huge destination was Brazil and the surrounding area, later on through here, and obviously what would become the United States. So they travel across, they unload slaves, and then they load their ships up with natural resources, things like timber, pellets, stuff that's kind of scarce in Europe. So they're getting raw materials and they're going back here. They trade those raw materials for manufactured goods, and then they take the manufactured goods down here and around and around and around it goes. So, triangle trade. Side one, side two, side three. Or beginning, middle, end. This is where we get the term Middle Passage from. They're our key term. Middle Passage because they figure it's the middle one. But really it's a triangle, right? So you and I are going, we know math, we can pick any one, but whatever. So this here is the Middle Passage. Middle Passage. It sucked, right? For the people who are newly enslaved, crammed onto ships, and they're going across. It freaking sucked. Scholars estimate that roughly 15% of newly enslaved folks died on these ships going across the Atlantic. They died from epidemic diseases. They died from acute dehydration caused by fluid loss from perspiration, vomiting, diarrhea, severe shortage of drinking water, all these sorts of things coming into play here. So this map is a little bit, shows you it's in real life, it's a little more complex, right? So Middle Passage only, but it's letting you know that it's all over the place. The size of these arrows, guys, is intended to show you, it's an attempt to show you volume, numbers of slaves being brought to various regions. So, a lot of folks coming here, some here, and then they bounce up from there, and eventually, you know, a bunch are, you know, being transported straight to Britain's North American colonies. And the early United States. Okay, so, there was one young African slave who had a very weird, like unusual life trajectory, but the dude ends up free, living in England. He writes a book talking about his experiences, a wide variety of experiences. On the subject of the Middle Passage, which you know he experienced as a teenager, he said, you know, the short version would be, the summary would be simply that it was horrific. He said, many of the slaves crowded together in suffocating heat, fouled by filth of all description, died from sickness. The shrieks of the women and the groans of the dying, he said, rendered the whole a scene of horror almost inconceivable. They're like, man, you wouldn't believe it unless you went through it. That's what he's saying. It's pretty nasty. So, we are birdies flying up in the sky looking down. They have somebody has sliced the ship in half, so we're seeing top, lower decks, and probably ship's hold, I guess we would say, but might be hard to see from where you're sitting, but it's slaves packed together like sardines. They're lying down next to each other, and they're just crammed in the ship. So, and then they are, I'll show you this, shackled and chained together, and they get to travel this way for weeks. So comfy. So head, feet. Again, probably hard to see from where you are, but ankles wearing shackles, chains linking these three dudes together. You know, so shelves. Well, it's, you know, it's just wild and crazy, wackadoodle, disturbing stuff. Little aisle, go down. You suppose these slave ships had 5-star restrooms? Not so much, right? You familiar with gravity? Exactly. Use your imagination. In other words, class, while all of this sucked, it was the further down you were, the worse it was. Because of gravity. So nasty conditions, just nasty stuff. Okay. Scholars estimate, by the way, that once these slaves were transported to their destination, wherever that was, within the first year, another 15% died. So that's 30%, you know, within, you know, between getting them transported and being through the first year, 30% of enslaved people died. So that's a pretty high percentage, pretty significant. The slave, yes.
You said 15 or
15, yeah. So slave owners referred to this 1-year period as the seasoning period. So, because you know, these folks are having to get used to a new climate, new continent altogether, but you know, new climate, new plants, new animals, new food, stuff that's completely foreign to them. And on top of all of those kinds of adjustments, they're adjusting to their new and deeply disturbing lives as slaves. And you know, labor that goes with it and all of that stuff. And then the treatment, et cetera, et cetera. So, it sucked. And 15% were unable to make that transition. So these guys are saying, if we get them past a year, we've basically got them. That's what they're saying. They're like,
Yeah, we're gonna lose some this during that first year, but once they hit the year mark, they're good to go. Because we're around, they'll stay around. Well, as you might imagine, slaves, not happy, not feeling this at all. So, let's go to South Carolina. September 1739. This, by the way, so heads up, warning in advance, this is the Stonewall Rebellion, one of your key terms. Stonewall Rebellion is also called Cato's Rebellion. Cato is the name of the slave who was in charge of this particular project. He's like, I'm mad at them, hell, I'm not gonna take it anymore, right? This guy was Congolese. He spoke Portuguese, and he's like, man, how the heck did I get myself here? So sometimes, I guess the point is, sometimes you'll see it written as Cato's Rebellion, sometimes it's called the Stonewall Rebellion. In the case of the Stonewall Rebellion, which is how I put it, it refers to a geographical feature, the Stonewall River, which is, lets you know the area where it occurred. So one name tells you who's in charge, the other name tells you where it happened. So these guys rise up. Step one, they gotta go shopping. So they go to the country store to get some guns and ammo. And so this is 20 slaves. 20 slaves rise up, they attack the country store, they kill the two storekeepers and take the store's guns, ammo, and powder. So now they're ready for the real phase of their project. They proceeded to plunder and burn roughly a half dozen plantations, and they ended up killing more than 20 white people. Numbers do vary, just FYI, you will see, the different sources, slightly different numbers, but essentially, that's the range we're talking. Yes, sir.
How much white people did you say they killed?
20. Yes.
Were there also 20 slaves or?
Correct.
Okay.
So, and both are estimates, right? So, we don't know 100%, but, okay. As you might guess, class, Anglos in the area quickly got on their horses and went after the slaves. They kill them, they capture them, stop them from doing any further damage to plantations or to white people. And then they kill them, all 20 of them. And then, because they want to send a message to all slaves that's in the area that says, please don't rise up, do not fight us, they cut off their heads and they stick them on fence posts on all the major thoroughfares throughout the whole area. And it's their way of saying, here's a reminder of what happens to slaves who rise up. The memo is, don't do it. Here's a very graphic warning. So, why do we care about the Stonewall Rebellion, class? It is this. It illustrated, for everybody, that 18th century slaves had zero chance of overturning slavery, and very, very, very little chance of defending themselves in any kind of bold strike for freedom. The message is, you're gonna have a slave revolt, strike for freedom, it's not gonna work. It won't be working for you. So, in the wake of Stonewall's Rebellion, South Carolina legislators passed a whole bunch of new laws regulating slave behavior and where they could go, what they could do, all this stuff. So what we're seeing here, so we mentioned with Jamestown, slavery was a very fluid thing, right? But what we're seeing by 1739 in the aftermath of this slave uprising is a whole bunch of laws put in place. The kind of thing that makes slavery look more like it does in the decades before the Civil War. So, and no coincidence, no other such slave uprisings occurred during the colonial period in the British colonies. So it's kind of a, like, so if your place and time is focusing on British North American colonies, it's a one and done thing. One slave uprising, it's smashed hard, and slaves get the message like, okay, that didn't go well for Cato, so I don't think I'll try that. Okay, so I mentioned that numbers differ, right? So, I gave you 20 and 20, keeps it nice and simple, but just so you're aware, if you ever encounter other sources, some estimates say they killed as many as 60 white people, and say there's as many as 25 slaves involved. So numbers vary, but it gives you a ballpark range. Okay. So, shifting gears away from slavery for the moment. This is my slide indicating a topic shift. Great Awakening, obviously a key term, right? So, we'll talk about the Great Awakening, and then we'll talk about two figures who are very important in the Great Awakening, two major players. Okay, so time period we're talking, roughly 1734 to 1745, so 11-year time period, 1734 to 1745. So in the colonies, or by this point, there's a whole lot of religions one could choose from, lots and lots and lots and lots. However, the dominant, if you want to call it as the dominant faith overall, was basically religious indifference. People saying, well, you know, my grandparents were very religious, but it's not really my faith. So, some Christians, as you might guess, mostly, ministers, pastors, became concerned about this. The ministers are saying, 20 years back, my chapel was filled up with people. All the pews were filled, people were listening, it was swell, and they're like, now there's 3 people who show up for Sunday services every week. So they're worried, they're concerned, they're going, this isn't working right. It's not how it's supposed to be. So they want to figure out some way to change things up, make it different. So, they developed, and I should mention this is happening in England. It's one of those things that's happening in 2 places at once. So it's happening in England, and it's happening in the English colonies at the same time. But they are coming up with a new way of presenting information, new angle on it, new style of preaching. So the way these guys are phrasing it, they're saying, instead of aiming for people's head, like, talking logic and stuff, they're like, never mind about that because it appears to be boring people to death and we're not really reaching them. So now they go, instead of that, we will aim for their hearts. It's all about emotion, never mind logic and reason, it's all about emotion, we will aim for that. So that's the plan. So, one of the first people, earliest people to get on board. Okay, and it's important to notice, like, broader context. For our purposes in this class, we will only be mentioning a couple names, so you don't drown in a million names. But there are lots and lots and lots of religious leaders involved. Lots. So this guy, Anglican, meaning dude is Church of England. He starts off preaching he's born and raised in England, so he's in England, he's preaching, and he goes with this new method of preaching. So, this guy ends up, so he draws upon his background in drama. In high school, he was in all school plays. But so he draws on his background in drama to like try to really grab people. And typically what ministers would do is they grab their sermon, they write it out longhand, right? And they get up in front of the crowd and they're going, and Fred went to the store to buy 5 apples, right? So this guy's like, screw that. He memorizes his sermons, so he doesn't have to have anything in front of him. And then he just goes wild and crazy. So people are used to coming and having some dude stand up in the same spot the whole time and not move. This guy, he's preaching for people, in front of people, he's like doing this thing the whole time, throwing his arms up and whispering and then yelling and then he's just like all over the place. And people are kind of like, whoa, what's that? And then they find it riveting. They're like, holy crap, this guy's like pulling us in. So, one of the things that so he is an itinerant, basically, meaning what he does is he gets on his little horse, he travels around the countryside, goes wherever the heck he wants, and preaches to people. He's preaching in outdoor venues. The ministers go, pardon me, George, you're doing 2 things wrong. One, you're not, they're like, first of all, you're approaching my congregation. Those are my people, my neighborhood, I preach to them. You don't. Secondly, they're like, you're not even, politely asking to use our buildings or anything like that. They're like, man, you just come into a neighborhood, you do your thing, and you leave on your little horsey to go off to the next one, and we're left to sort of pick up the pieces and sort of reestablish the social order. They're like, you create chaos and leave, we have to step in and be like, okay, y'all now chill everybody, chill. They don't like it. They're like, we don't like you, man, you suck. So, he goes, okay, fair enough, I'm out. So at the age of 25, in somewhere around 1740, give or take, this guy travels to North America. You'll notice by the date that depending on which date you want to use, the Great Awakening has already been going on in the colonies for 5 or 6 years. So he's stepping into it right smack dab in the middle, basically. But he comes and brings with him this style. He sort of outperforms the others, the people who were already in the colonies, the ministers, who were already doing this kind of a thing, aiming for the heart, not the head. He outperforms them. So, one of the things that he does that helps him, he's really early on for this, but he has a savvy sense of the media, how to use newspapers, like advertising, stuff like that. He's got this stuff figured out. So, 2 things that he uses. One, he puts ads in newspapers, and it'll say something like, such and such time, place, y'all come listen to this guy give a sermon. And then he'd have a bunch of riders, guys on horses, going out in front of him telling, warning the countryside, hey, this guy's coming to preach religion. Y'all be sure to come out and hear what this dude has to say. So, and that's how he's getting, at least initially, that's how he's getting very large crowds. Once his name and fame spread, people are like, yeah, we don't need to read it in the newspaper anymore, we got this. So, just to give you a sense for the scope of this guy's project, in 1 year in the British colonies, this guy traveled 5,000 miles on horseback, preached more than 350 times, and a couple of examples from cities. Dude goes to Boston to preach. An estimated 25,000 people gathered on Boston Common to hear him speak. Dude goes to Philadelphia. 12,000 come hear him speak, including a young man by the name of Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin comes because he is a curious man. he wants to learn. He loves learning, right? He just wants to soak it all in. So he's coming more out of curiosity. He's not particularly interested in joining a particular denomination, but he's like, okay, you know, well, what is it with this guy? What's the attraction? What's the appeal? What's his approach? So, but he comes. Benjamin Franklin shows up, takes it all in. Then, in New York, 8,000 listen. So you'll notice rather different thing going on. In Boston, 25,000 people. New York, only 8,000. New York, not so, interested in religion. Not nearly as interested as the people in Massachusetts area. So within a 15-month time span, roughly 25% of the population of British colonial North America had heard this guy. So, his central thing, like as far as like topic, what he's teaching, it's not new. Central theme is essentially a question, which is, what must I do to be saved? That's the question he's going to address in all of his sermons. That's what he's going to answer. So, this guy got, as he's, going back and forth and whispering and yelling and doing all this stuff, he so gets into this, that, he yell out, my master, my lord, like the dude's in the middle of a sentence and then he's like, my master, my lord, people are like, what? He's just doing this kind of stuff. And it was, the effect, according to folks who were there, folks who attended, basically said that the effect was electric. Crowds responded with outpourings of emotion at his sermons. People are crying, sobbing, shrieking, swooning, fainting, and they said it seemed like all of New England. So he goes everywhere, right? But clearly he's having the most success in New England. But these folks are saying, in New England, feels like we're sieged by a spiritual conversion, like the whole society, everybody. This guy apparently was so good in delivering speeches and pulling people in. They said, so this is people who attended, right? But they said that he could utter the word Mesopotamia in such a way as to make people cry. That's what they said. So apparently he could really tap into people's emotions and run with it. So, at first, ministers in North America are going, sweet, we love this guy, and these other dudes doing this with him, because, well, people start going back to church. Church attendance shoots through the roof, and so the ministers are like, wow, last year, I got 2 or 3 people per sermon, every Sunday. They're going, now, the pews are packed. The building is packed to the rafters. This is great. So they like it. And then, over time, as this guy keeps doing this, some of these ministers came to the same conclusion that some of the British ministers had, which was, essentially, their criticism is the same. They're going, dude, you come here, you don't ask permission to preach to our folks, the people in our congregation, you just do it at some outdoor scene, and you spread your message, you get the people all emotional, all riled up, then you go on out of town, and we have to tell people to chill, and we have to clean up your mess. So, the tide is starting to turn against him. What he and others like him, but mostly, this guy's like most famous for this, but he ends up dividing the clergy in the English colonies into 2 groups. They called themselves, so one group called themselves the New Lights, one group called themselves the Old Lights. Class, if you had to guess, what would you say the so-called Old Light ministers' position on this subject is? What are they saying?
They don't like him.
Yeah. old way, man. We like how it used to be. I think we should go back to that. In contrast, as you might guess, the new lights are like, we're giving this guy 2 thumbs up. We like it. We support it. It's swell. Okay. This guy, by the way, so he comes over to to the colonies, right? Because people in England are upset with him. He ends up, by the way, settling in Georgia. And, wait for it, owning slaves. So, naturally, people are like, dude, you're a religious man, you're a Christian. What in the heck are you doing owning slaves? His response, he says, oh, no, it's totally okay to own slaves as long as you A, treat them nicely, and B, convert them to Christianity. He says what's wrong is mistreating slaves, or he says it's wrong to purchase them. It's like, no. Don't engage in commerce, you're buying and selling humans here. So it's immoral to be actively engaged in the enslaving part or the selling part, but in his mind, it sounds like he's like trying to find some way to justify it, right? But it's totally fine to actually own them, he says. So some screwy thinking. So kind of an interesting stuff. Okay. Minister number 2. Okay. Did I hear someone say he looks? Or am I hallucinating? Okay. Well, he's certainly not smiling on school picture, that is he? Anyway, any of you familiar with Alexander Hamilton, Aaron Burr? Maybe you saw the Broadway play. This guy, just for reference purposes, this guy is Aaron Burr's grandfather. That's where he fits in. So, this guy is addressing the same central theme in his speeches, which is, people are basically, their question is, dude, I don't wanna go to hell, what do I need to do to be saved? How do I do that? So, he's going to help. However, his version of helping is very, very different from his British counterpart. Well, he would self-identify as British too, but so 1741, this guy comes up with a new sermon, and he really likes it. It turns out to be a smash hit among audiences, so he's like, sweet, I'll stick with it. It's called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. That's what he titles his sermon. He gives it a title. Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God.
What do you suppose his message is to people based on the title of his sermon? Anybody feel like guessing? Sure.
Don't sin, God will get angry.
So, I missed the first part.
Don't sin, God will get angry.
Yeah, he's basically like, you're all a bunch of sinners, and God's really, really, really mad. He's angry.
So, excuse me. So, this guy is a Puritan. So, he's different from, one dude is an Anglican, right, Church of England. This guy's a Puritan. So he is gonna have some different views to share. And he tends to focus on the negative. So his 1741 sermon that he keeps repeating over and over and over afterwards, just keeps using it. It focuses on the depravity of humans. And oh, by the way, this is something like 35 pages type. That's how long the sermon is, I mean, you know, but he's got it written out longhand, right? But, a zillion pages of this, but he just goes on and on and on about people, about God's pissed, you're going to hell, and, you're all depraved, you're all vile dirtbags, the man says. So people are like, so, Jonathan, where's the part about me getting saved? 'Cause I'm trying to avoid hell, and we're asking you, how do we do that? Your answer is, they're all going to hell. What kind of answer is that, right? So they're like, but he had his own following. He attracted many, 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 many people who were riveted by his sermons. He'd get riled up, preach fire and brimstone, and people were just glued to it. Okay, so this is a printout of his sermon. His sermon. That's how long that is, that's how far it goes. I'm gonna read you a little chunk here. It's probably the most well-known passage from this. But he goes, your wickedness makes you as it were heavy as lead, and to tend downwards with great weight and pressure towards hell. And if God should let you go, you would immediately sink and swiftly descend and plunge into the bottomless gulf, and your healthy constitution and your own care and prudence and best contrivance and all your righteousness would have no more influence to uphold you and keep you out of hell than a spider's web would have to stop a falling rock. And he just goes on and on. He finds like an almost endless number of ways to say, you're dirtbags, God's pissed, you're going to hell. I mean, he's very creative. Like, if you were to read it, I'm like, okay, so I had to read it in high school. I don't know if you guys had to, but I had to read it for an English literature class in high school. So, kind of an odd choice, I thought, but he's very creative in that, you know, he finds a million ways to say this without repeating himself or without using swear words or stuff like that. He's just like, so, but people just kept coming back. More and more and more. They just kept coming back to listen to this dude. So, one possibility, class. So, today, in our society, people pay serious money to go to the theater during, you know, fall and watch scary movies, get the crap scared out of them. People like that. So, not my thing personally, but, you know, if I went to one of his sermons, 10 minutes in, I'd be like, I'm done, I'm out. But these folks, I'm thinking maybe they're the, 18th century counterpart to people today who love horror films. Like, well, we don't have Hollywood to help us, so we'll just go listen to this guy. Well, honey, it's Friday night, it's date night, what should we do? I know, free date. Let's go hear Jonathan Edwards scare the crap out of us again. We did that last week and it was so fun. We couldn't sleep for several days, so let's go back, right? Anyway, so he scares the crap out of people, and they seem to like it. Okay, so stepping back to broader picture, right? Stepping away from the two dudes. Broader picture, Great Awakening. Okay, definition time. You'll want to write this down, class. Great Awakening. A major religious revival that became the first major mass movement in American history.
Can you say it again?
Sure. So, the Great Awakening, a major religious revival that became the first major mass movement in American history. at its core, the Great Awakening changed the way that people experienced God. So, instead of like, so they're making, they're finding their own way to make a connection with God. It's intense, it's emotional, they're finding a way to connect personally with the divine. And typically, like, the people who were most affected by this, most interested, were the poorer classes of people. Small farmers, traders, artisans, servants, laborers. These are the kind of folks who typically are going to these things and going, okay, I got this. I'm soaking it up. One textbook that Brookhaven used to have us teach out of said that the first Great Awakening didn't, in the long term, it didn't do anything. However, a couple thoughts on that. One thing at least that still remains, it introduced to the continent religious revivals. They weren't a thing until the Great Awakening. Do we have religious revivals today? The answer is yes. Yes, we do. So, for one thing, one shift that is permanent is religious revivals become a permanent part of, the American cultural landscape. Okay, one historian looking at the Enlightenment, he's a historian who specializes in this period, put it this way. He said that a psychological earthquake had reshaped the human landscape. He said these people who were converted through this process were new people, new men, new women, with new attitudes towards themselves, towards their neighbors, towards their religion, towards politicians, just new attitude all around. Let's see, gonna skip some stuff here. Okay. Ultimately, the reason why these revivalists were successful was perhaps not so much the details of the content of their sermons, but they are replacing, like in their sermons, they're replacing oppressive authority figures with faith in a loving God. And that's really like the thing that grabs people, they're like, oh, okay. It gives them hope, a sense of hope, something to cling to, look to when things are crappy. So that ultimately is the reason for their success. Okay. Any questions about slavery, religion, in terms of like what we've been talking about? Okay. Let's see how we're doing here. We're going to switch topics, folks. Here we go. So, we are going to start traveling down the road to revolution. To do that, I gotta pull up another PowerPoint.